For today's video, I'm going to demonstrate using TextField TextFormatter with Unary operators to validate alphabetic letters and decimal numbers. When considering alphabetic letters, there's something you need to consider. You need to allow the empty through. I'll demonstrate this later on in the code. But to demonstrate, as you type in this text field, if you type in a valid digit, it'll allow this entry through. As you can see down here, I'm outputting the actual text entered and the text that's allowed through the actual control itself. As we continue, if we type in an invalid, a number, which is not allowed, you can see down here the text that's actually been typed in and the actual new text control. If I continue to type with a valid letter, you can see the error message that we had displayed down here disappears. And now this invalid digit has been removed. If I continue to type and exceed the maximum stipulated length, this time 5 letters, it'll display an error message. For decimal numbers, the same thing applies. If you type in anything that exceeds the maximum stipulated length, it'll display an error message. If you attempt to type in a non-decimal number, it'll display an error message, as you can see down here from the inputs that have been put in. If you continue to type in a valid decimal point, this will be allowed through, and you can only allow to put in 1 decimal point. Okay, let's get started. Okay, I'm just going to go through the code and explain it. If you're interested in setting up JavaFX, then watch my video on how to install setup JavaFX. And if you want to know how to code your own JavaFX projects using Scene Builder, watch my video on how to code JavaFX projects. If you're interested in more about TextFormatter, then watch the first video in this series. Okay, now we just got a basic main here, which will stage the scene. Then we've got a FXML controller, which control the actual features that we add to the scene itself. This is the FXML controller .fxml file, which is generated by Scene Builder. In here in Scene Builder, we basically got a text box, which has got an FXID label, and we've got a text box for decimal numbers, which has got an FXID label. And then we've got an error label down the bottom with an SXID as well. If you watch my video on how to code JavaFX projects, it'll show you how to set this up so you can code your own JavaFX projects. Okay, now in the code. At the top here, we declared all our regular expressions. We have 2 for alphabetic. I'll explain the reason why that is in a sec. We have 1 for decimal points, and we have 1 here for the maximum input, which you can just set. Down here, we have our Unary operators, which we pass to the actual text formatter itself. At the top, we're just setting the actual label to nothing. And here we have our first actual Unary operator change that we're using itself. Now, we need to allow empty inputs to pass through. To demonstrate why this is, I'll go through this. Alright, to demonstrate the reason why we have this up here, I'm going to use this filter here. Now, when we're actually typing in our letters, if we go to the end, when we're deleting and we get to the last character, it's going to pass through an empty. And if it sees an empty, then the original equation will not allow this through, and therefore it wouldn't delete the last character. So to fix this, we can do this 2 ways. The first way, we can just allow the empty through. So to demonstrate this filter, as you can see, as I type, if I get to the end, it allows this last empty to be deleted and allowed through. We can achieve the result a second way. How we can do this is allowing empties in the regular expression pattern itself. This is another way of doing it, but it's not my preferred method. Now to demonstrate, make sure I've got the right filter. Now to allow the actual last digit to be deleted because it's allowing an empty to be passed through. But ideally, what I would do is I'd always run this Unary operator with actually allowing empty through as a statement, just in case you're using all these different regular expressions in the future and you don't allow for this empty to be passed through. This is an easy way of doing it. So we're going to set this filter here as a filter that we're using. Demonstrate this code. See, now that's allowing it to come through. Okay, to quickly go over the code itself. If you watch my first video in this series, we'll actually go through explaining unary operators and Lambda expressions. But in this video, I'm just basically going to go through the main code itself, showing to you how to validate for alphabetic letters and for decimal points. So all we're using here is we're actually just using irregular expressions to see if this matches. If this does match, we set the error label to nothing. We set the actual white background for the actual text box itself. We check here that we haven't exceeded the maximum length. If we haven't, we return that change. If we had exceeded the maximum length, then we give an error message. If it passes through and the match is not true, then we give an error message down here. And we set the actual text field to pink, and we return null, not allowing this change to go through. Similarly, for decimal numbers, what we're doing here is we're just using an actual regular expression here to check it against. Now for numbers, we don't have to worry about the empty because the unary operator passes it through. So here again, we're just checking for the matches, setting the appropriate label to null, setting the actual text field to white, checking for the maximum length, allowing that change through if it hasn't exceeded the length, giving the error message if it has, giving the error message if it's not a decimal number, and then once it passes through, we'll set the actual text field to pink and we'll return null, not allowing this to go through. Okay, if you'd like all the code, please subscribe on YouTube and subscribe on my website and I can send you all the code. In the next video, we're going to go through email validation using TextFormatter with unary operators. I'm going to show you 3 different ways to do this and explain the best way to do this, and also go through SQL injections in text fields as well. Okay,